My name is Hibo Jama. I'm with Nisaa African Family Services, an organization serving victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault in the state of Iowa. I sat in SART team as an advocate. I used to be an advocate before I moved to the management position. But when I was an advocate, I used to sit on the SART team, and my role there was to advocate for the victims of sexual assault, to make the other organizations understand the impact of sexual assault victims who have a language barrier, who came from other cultures, traditions, who have all these challenges, and yet they're not understood, who are fearful of the system. If they report, what's going to happen? What's impact that's going to occur? They're fearful. And fearing the community, fearing the system, and also the community where they come from, because sexual assault is something that is contained, it's not talked about, it's put under the rug all the time, it's not discussed. And so talking for them and advocating for them and having services that are congruent with diverse culture traditions. And so I was motivated to be part of that, and it was a good and being present in this. And though at the beginning it was a little bit uncomfortable because I wasn't able to see people of color, a lot of them there, but again it was like, as time went by and people started getting to know each other and cultural specific organizations started growing, and then people were represented, and it's having the victims, because if you say you are survivor-centered, how are you survivor-centered if you don't have representation from the other communities? This work is so important to me because, just like my colleague Barwaka said, we come from immigrant and refugee communities. And we know victims. Sometimes they come to us like domestic abuse victims, but we don't know that they have been sexually assaulted victims in the refugee camp. Because when they come, if you are a refugee, you are vulnerable, and maybe they have been victimized there. So we do understand the process that we came through. We do understand our community, and then again, we are we have, and we speak more than 2 languages, we speak 3 languages. So it's like, how can we use what we have for the community, for the better of the communities that are suffering? So it's something that, and it's in with us. It's like, community involvement, being part of the community, serving the community is something that, and something that's like, it's just, we feel like it's a calling to do this work, because everybody cannot do. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. So if you take that, sometimes it comes with risk, because sometimes from the community we have fingers pointed at us, and it will be like, oh, they work for that organization. We don't care what people say, but what we care about is what change have we made in somebody's life, and that's what is motivating us every day. I have my own kids, and I'll talk to them. I will be like, don't look at your own self, but think about other people. How can you be important to somebody else's life? And if we are all open to that, and we are driven by compassion, and then we can do the work. Yeah, I want SART to be inclusive of everybody. Everybody to be inclusive, have at least representation of every community in there, because progress goes with changes. I know sometimes change is very scary to some people, but sometimes it's something that you need to adapt for you to progress. For SART to progress and serve all community and be survivor-centered, I think it's good for them to open their doors and be inclusive. Think outside the box and say you're survivor-centered. Think outside the box and say, what is this? How can we serve this? Because in my culture we say one finger alone will not wash a face. So if we work solitary ourselves only, we will not get anywhere. But if we work as a team, we can accomplish a lot. I will share, like, we had this survivor who came to us, and the system, she felt like the system failed her because she reported, she did everything that was supposed to be done. But again, when that case go to the prosecution, if the prosecutor himself feels that this case is weak, how is that victim? It take them so much to come up and say that I'm victim. I've done all this. And then if the system will fail her, then look at the other victims who will be coming. They will not be coming to seek services because they know there is no system that's supporting them. So it's like, why should I report? What will I get out of here? And then they go through the depression. They go through all these stresses. So it's good, the system, to say, like, even if they have language problem, get somebody. If they have engage them. And then system has to be open also. They have to be open-minded. Because if you're working for example, I was working with a victim who I was a rape victim. And through that rape, she conceived. And she's wishing to keep that baby, even if it was from rape. But again, for her, she wants to keep it. But other mainstream organization will say, oh, I'm not going to work with her. She want to keep it. Why don't you abort? No. For us, we'll say, no. What you want, we work with you with what you want. And we understand. And we will ask more, like, why do you want to keep this? And sometimes they will say, like, I'm fearful because maybe this is the only kid that I'm going to have in my entire life. So why will I go through aborting? I'm going to keep mine. So it's like sometimes you have to be open-minded, and then it's like what the survivor wants. Sometimes we have our own assumptions, we have our own ideas, but we don't instill those to the survivor. Let them tell us what they want, and we will work with them with what they want and what they're happy with. Sincerely speaking, it's not, and the SART team are not inclusive. They are not inclusive as much as the other. And because I think coming from different organizations, different backgrounds, people belittle you, see you differently. You don't understand, you don't get it. But what they don't understand is what combo does this advocate who's from other culture, what are they bringing to the table? How are they because we build trust with communities, right? And if a survivor comes to, they're scared of the system. And if, for example, a mainstream organization advocate is sitting there, the question they're asking, this victim is wondering, where are you taking my information? They will not feel comfortable. But again, by having somebody else, somebody who will understand them, and they will open up. And speaking of the other organizations, it takes time to build that trust. Because again, it's give and take. If they see you, if they share a case with you, as a coming from cultural specific organization, if a mainstream organization share a case with me, I have to handle that case diligently. I have to engage the organization that referred. We have to build a core advocacy. I'm not gonna say, oh, this victim is from my community. I'm gonna work with this victim and I'm gonna push away the mainstream organization. No, it's for us to build that trusting relationship because this is survivor-centered. I'm gonna do this portion of the work. You do the portion of the work. Then the survivor is served appropriately. Is served because the needs are more. The needs, one organization alone cannot do things. And then again, having that way you build the relationship with other mainstream organization, and that way you deliver because it's the survivor center, right? Then the services available to the survivor. Survivors understand they went through the sexual assault. They understand what it feels like. Nobody else can understand. Advocate, even if you have been working in an advocacy organization for over 50 years, you will not understand the victim. The victim, what they bring to the table is visual of what happened, how you engage to that, how you engage with with the survivor who went through sexual assault. And what gaps are we missing? Because there are so many combos, there are so many things that we can miss as we're doing our assessment. What are we missing? The other thing is like coming from refugee communities, immigrant communities, you need to understand their background. These communities are coming from where? For example, if some African countries, they have female genital cutting. If a female who went through female genital cutting is a sexual assault victim, how are you going to approach that case? It's completely different than the other mainstream organization, because this is a woman who has been traumatized from the time she was 5 years old because she had to go through the cutting. So how are you going to approach that case? And then it's the community that she's coming from. They value having no sex before they're married, before they're married. So those kind of women, because if the man has the right to divorce that woman if she's not a virgin. So how are you going to discuss those things? And then sometimes if you're working with that victim, again, you have to understand sometimes it's like maybe you're the only support that she has. She can't tell her mom, she can't tell her sister, she can't tell her family, because her family will stigmatize her. You are there wrong time. Why were you dressed like that? And you provoked him. So it's victim blaming. So she doesn't have no more other support. It's only you that she has. So how are you going to approach that? It's a delicate case. So when you talk or you have that survivor on the table with you, she will empower you. She will make you think outside the box. What are the other combos that you're missing? And as soon as you get the puzzle, then you can work with that survivor. And she will be trusting you, and you will get things done for her and the other communities. Probably she might end up being advocate, and you don't know. Yeah, because, and when they become advocates, they're the best advocates because they have walked that walk themselves, and they know how to get there. We don't judge, we don't have assumptions, but sometimes it's just having that cultural congruent services for every survivor is very important.